If you were around when Star Wars Return of the Jedi came out in theaters, you'll know that from 1983, after it was released, until 1999, which was like 16 years, we had a huge drought of no Star Wars movies, TV shows, except for books and comics. And you could collect the Star Wars figures and ships and stuff. Now, I loved the Star Wars expanded universe. I loved the books. That's where I read about Thrawn for the first time, where I read about the twins, Han Solo and Princess Leia's twins. And I just really enjoyed it. It seemed like I was able to get in touch with the Star Wars universe through them. But little did I know, in an article that came out, it says that George Lucas hated the extended universe. And I found an article and I thought we could go through it real quick just to see what you think, and I'll give you my thoughts afterwards. And I want you to let me know your thoughts too. So let me pull this up real quick. So there we have Thrawn, and it says George Lucas secretly hated the Star Wars expanded universe. For longtime Star Wars fans, there is great fondness for the expanded universe, yes. And for a good reason. Back before the Star Wars prequels came out, this interconnected world of books, comics, and games helped flesh out the galaxy far, far away that hadn't had a proper film since 1983. And yes, I did play the games. They had Star Wars Monopoly, they had Star Wars video games, for like the Nintendo and Atari. So that was really cool. Most exciting was the idea that the expanded universe had an interconnected canon of events blessed by Lucasfilm, which fans enjoyed because it meant these stories really happened. There was great sadness when Disney decanonized all this in 2014. But even before that, George Lucas secretly hated the Star Wars expanded universe. And I was sad when Disney decanonized everything too. Fans assumed George Lucas signed off on everything. Back at the height of the interconnected storytelling, most fans implicitly assumed that George Lucas supported the expanded universe because all of the stories were approved by his company, Lucasfilm. Writers couldn't exactly go rogue, so when bonker things happened, including everything from Luke Skywalker getting married to a moon fatally landing on Chewbacca, it all had to get official approval ahead of time. It turns out, though, that the one person who never truly approved of most of these events was Lucas himself. Lucas disavowed wild EU storylines. As recently as 2008, George Lucas summed up his thoughts on the expanded universe, which notably wouldn't be removed from canon until 2014. In an interview with Total Film, he didn't mince words in this interview, saying that now there have been novels about the events after episode 4, which isn't at all what I would have done with it. After that, he began implicitly calling out some of the wilder storylines from the comics and books, claiming that once Vader dies, he doesn't come back to life, the Emperor doesn't get cloned, and Luke doesn't get married. Every EU creation dismissed by Lucas. At the time, the idea that George Lucas actually hated much of what was going on with the expanded universe came as a major shock. However, this is perfectly in line with what the franchise creator had been saying for years before that. In an earlier interview that appears on the special edition DVDs of the original trilogy, Lucas claimed that the EU stories are another author's interpretation of what I've created and not to be taken seriously, as far as what is really going on in the Star Wars world. Claims separate canon exist for each licensed project. In a 2003 interview, George Lucas clarified that I've not read any expanded universe stories and that I've told them when they started writing that I wouldn't read any of them. In fact, his most intimate involvement with these fan favorite tales is telling the assorted writers what not to do. I blocked out certain periods they couldn't touch where the real story happens. Across various interviews with George Lucas, his most consistent claim about the expanded universe was that it simply took place in a different world than his own. He told Cinescape in 2002, "There are two worlds here, my world, which is the movies, and there's this other world that has been created, which I say is the parallel universe the licensing world of the books, games, and comic books. That same year, he was asked whether he supervised the various EU stories and replied, I try not to think about that, and I have my own world in movies and I follow it. The EU wasn't the real Star Wars. Aside from his general dislike of these other stories, one of the wildest things George Lucas revealed about the expanded universe is that it owes its existence to the rival franchise Star Trek. In order to convince Lucas to authorize the EU, the president of Lucasfilm Licensing explained how Star Trek had its TV shows and spin off books, and that these were completely different and didn't have anything to do with each other. With that clarification, Lucas gave his blessing to create countless new stories that, in his mind, had nothing to do with the real Star Wars story. Star Wars outgrew George Lucas. For hardcore fans of these stories, including ourselves, it can be heartbreaking to hear that George Lucas oscillated between indifference and hatred when it came to the expanded universe. We can hardly imagine this extended galaxy far, far away without EU characters like Mara Jade, someone that Lucas himself disliked from the beginning. However, Star Wars grew beyond Lucas long before he sold everything to Disney, and it's important for the fandom to collectively realize some Jedi-like wisdom. Canon has always been personal, and the only thing that matters is which stories matter to you. Amen. Okay, so what are your thoughts about this article? My thoughts are I'm sad that George Lucas was so focused on his own story that he couldn't look out and use parts of the extended universe, which we as fans had grown to love. Like they said about Mara Jade and Luke getting married, and then Chewbacca dying, which him dying, I would have been sad. Well, they licensed that material from the author, so Lucasfilm should have been able to use that material for their own use. So I think some of that stuff George could have used and added to his storyline. I don't know why he had this aversion that, no, it's got to be from me, from my mind. I know he had some, really great ideas for like Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, but a lot of that was, he had to compromise in order to get it all done in the movies. Star Wars, his wife like totally re-edited the whole movie, and that's why it was so popular, because he was going to go in there and George was going to take out all aspects of the Force in Star Wars. He was going to take everything out dealing with the Force. And Steven Spielberg said, man, you should leave it in there. And everybody else, all the other directors, Francis Ford Coppola and all the other directors were like, no, you shouldn't. It's dumb. But I mean, look at it today. May the Force be with you, And his wife and one of her helpers left it in there, and they re-edited it to what we see today as Star Wars. What an awesome thing, that he had people that were backing him up and helping him get this out there. I just shudder to think what it would have been if it would just been George Lucas all by himself. No man is an island. We all need help. And I think that using extended universe lore in the movies would be fantastic. Disney needs to do that, because the Star Wars content that Disney's putting out right now isn't very good, and they just need some help, serious help. And they own all of this now, all the extended universe stuff, and they can use it. They could use all of it. So that's what I wanted to say. What are your thoughts about the extended universe? Put it down in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts. And if you liked that video, you should check out this video. It talks about the Skeleton Crew coming out and what it's going to be like, and what are my thoughts on the Skeleton Crew trailer. So may the Force be with you always.